Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, how a year of war changes a life.
This is a genocide. This is not a war. Every single person in Gaza is a legitimate target to be killed for the Israeli army.
A Gaza correspondent on turning trauma into testimony on the world stage. I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take. On October 7th of last year, Hamas launched an unprecedented attack into Israel. An attack that seemed to take the world, including Israel, almost completely by surprise. The death toll in Israel from October 7th is listed as 1,139. Israel's response has also been unprecedented. The listed death toll from its war in Gaza is now more than 40,000, but medical experts estimate it could be in the hundreds of thousands. It includes Al Jazeera journalists, as well as their families. Throughout this last year, we've brought you voices from the Gaza Strip who've shared the reality of covering Israeli bombardment, all while trying to survive, including the voice of Al Jazeera's Gaza correspondent, Youmna el-Sayed.
Do you know anything about that? What can you report at this stage? All right. Youmna, please take cover. If you are in a position to do so safely, you can explain to us what we're happening. If you are not in a position to do so safely,
Yes.
then please get to safety.
No, it's okay. This is a missile attack on Palestine Tower, right in the middle of Gaza City.
Youmna, take a moment to breathe. Take a moment.
Youmna, welcome to The Take.
Hi, Malika.
It is so good to finally be talking to you face to face across oceans, but your voice is one that so many of our viewers and listeners are familiar with. And it's good to have you here, although the circumstances we all wish were different. So we're now a year into the war on Gaza. And not only has it not ended, it's expanded exponentially. You're in Cairo now, and you arrived there in January after what can only be described as a very difficult few months, to put it very lightly, such an understatement. Looking back on this past year, there are so many places we could start this conversation, but I want to begin when you first started to think about this as a deliberate genocide. Can you take me back to what made you decide that's what this was?
From the very second day, Malika, when the first two statements by the Israeli minister saying that we're going to cut off all the water supply and energy supply on Gaza, that was very clear that it's a war against the civilians. After that, at the same time, they said they're going to completely besiege the Gaza Strip, which is already under an Israeli siege for the past 17 years before October 7th. So when Israel says that it's going to completely besiege the Gaza Strip and tighten the blockade completely on Gaza, which meant that no food is entering, no supplies will be entering, nothing will be entering, that for me is targeting the civilians directly, the people. After that, from the 8th of October, the amount of indiscriminate bombardments on residential areas without prior notice, very quickly, it started targeting hospitals. The Baptist hospital was the first massacre where the tents of the displaced were directly targeted with missiles, burning them alive. That's when I knew, after the targeting of the Baptist hospital, the Ahli Baptist hospital, that there are no more red lines, that every single person in Gaza is a legitimate target to be killed for the Israeli army. And that's when I felt deep inside, I was convinced that this is a genocide, this is not a war.
Did that change any of your own calculus and how you were moving about and how you were covering it as a journalist, or how you were living it as a person and a mother and a wife and a daughter?
Well, of course, the first feeling that I had for sure is that I'm not safe out there in the field. Neither are my children at home. So imagine being a mother, regardless of being a journalist, and you have this constant feeling, constant fear that next missile would fall on your home. And I lived these feelings, I lived them, Malika, very strongly, and not just one time. I lived them when I was in Jabalia refugee camp, and Israel restruck a number of residential homes that were already targeted. They were bombed, and they hit that area again when it was filled with people, with journalists, with paramedics, with the defense teams trying to save the people from under the rubble from those targetings. And it just seemed that, well, they don't really care whether you're labeled as a journalist, a paramedic, a defense team. It doesn't matter. They will hit anyway.
I remember your coverage of the Jabalia refugee camp because you went there to film.
Well, Sahel, it's been over 24 hours continuously that the bombardments across the Gaza Strip have been relentless, from the air, from the sea, and from the land.
There's so many moments over this past year and in your coverage, I'm sure, that stick with you. But do you remember that moment? Do you remember that reporting?
I remember it very well. I remember that day I was going to die. Suddenly, this call came from the Israeli army saying that they're going to restrike again now. And that was like the warning that we get. And it was a total chaos, you know? It was like Judgment Day. Everyone running and screaming. My team disappeared in seconds from around me. I found everyone. I was like, I didn't know where to go. I was in a shock, and I started running. And I'm wearing my very heavy pressed gear, and the only thing I thought about, if the missile falls, I'm going to vanish, Malika. Nobody's even going to find my body. And it was like so crowded with people. I dial quickly a news desk, Doha news desk, and my colleague Hayat, she answers me, and I know Hayat from her voice. And I just say, Hayat, I'm at Jabalia refugee camp. They're going to strike now. And the first missile falls. And I drop my phone. I fall meters away with the pressure of the missile. And I just don't realize what's going on. And I have to act very quickly because I know they're going to strike again. And I just grab my phone, and Hayat is screaming on the other end, "Are you alive, Youmna? Talk to me. Are you alive?" And I'm like, "I'm alive." That was the first missile. And she goes, "Run, run, Youmna, keep running." And she stays with me on the phone while I run and run and run until the second missile hits again. And I can hear that it's relatively far. So I know that I'm a bit safe. And that's when I just realized that in a matter of minutes, just a couple of minutes ago, I would have completely vanished.
Wow, Youmna, I'm getting goosebumps hearing you retell that story. I can't imagine what it was like to live it, but it's also making me think what your family, what they must have been thinking, knowing that you were out there reporting for your job. So over the first 3 months of the war, you and your family were displaced 6 times. We heard bits and pieces of your journey through the voice memos that you sent to the podcast.
tomorrow morning we need to leave. I'm just looking around. What can I carry for 4 kids? Although the trip was very risky and the bombardment was ongoing, we got to Khan Yunis safely, thank goodness. We're still trapped here in Khan Yunis. Thousands of people are still trying to get to Khan Yunis. It's like we're being trapped in one place so that we're all bombarded together.
And it wasn't just you. You were traveling with your 4 children, aged 5 to 12. What did they see and experience that you think will stay with them?
They can't get over the scenes of destruction, the scenes of injured children. My 8-year-old Sarí, the most thing that she was afraid of was to be an only survivor. Because of how many children that are only survivors that she saw. So Malika, she constantly said, let's stick together as we sleep, so that if a missile falls, we all get killed at once. Until now, it's 10 months since we evacuated Gaza. She has to sleep next to her sister on the same bed. Just a month ago, their school was bombed. Al-Nasr school in Gaza City. And Malika, you have no idea how much they cried, how much it broke their hearts. Aline, for example, she's got this amount of rage inside her. Great amount of rage. You can't believe that a child who just turned 13 years old has all this amount of rage and anger inside her for the silence of the world against what's happening in Gaza. Every single day, I swear to God, they ask me, when are we going back to Gaza?
A couple of days before you finally left your home in Gaza City for the final time, your husband got a phone call. The person on the other end of the line identified himself as a member of the Israeli army. You talked about this call on Al Jazeera.
The phone call that we received was from a private number. He literally said, he gave my husband's full name and told him that this is the Israeli army. We are telling you to evacuate south because in the coming hours, it's going to be very dangerous in the area where you are.
You were essentially threatened by the Israeli military. They knew who you were. They knew what you do. And again, you have 4 children. You're in a residential building. What was the impact of that call?
Well, first of all, the call, when it came, it made me feel that as a parent now, I'm a direct threat and danger to my children, the most precious people in my life. I was very terrified to even speak about the call, to be honest, because I was afraid for them. So before I spoke about the call to Al Jazeera, before I did anything, I called Walid al-Umari, Al Jazeera bureau chief in the West Bank. And Walid said, I'll do my investigation and get back to you. Minutes later, Walid calls me and he says, Youmna, this is a direct threat to you and to your family. And I'm like, Walid, I can't get out. My home is under ongoing bombardment, relentless bombardment. I'm trapped at home. And then even when I spoke about it on air, I was terrified because I didn't want to do anything to provoke them to actually target my home, to target my children. But I had to, on the other hand, because in front of the whole world, they should know that I have been threatened to be killed. And so has my family. When the call came, my 12-year-old Aline,
So about a week ago, we finally left Gaza to Egypt.
Malika, when she heard
It was a very sad
the
feeling
call
to leave Gaza like that.
and she heard us speaking about it and everything, and she saw it on TV, she held me from my chest like this, from my clothes. She pulled me and she said, "They're going to kill us because of you."
Oh.
And she was devastated. She was terrified. She was scared. She said, "They're going to kill us all because of you. They're going to kill everyone because of you." She was even worried about the neighbors. She said, "They're going to kill these innocent people because of you." And I was like, you're in that situation where you can't even explain yourself because you can't blame her for being so terrified. Already, you risk your life to do this job. It's a legitimate job. You're supposed to be protected under all international laws and conventions. They make you feel like you're a criminal for doing this job and you need to be punished. And it's not just you. It's you, your entire family, your loved ones, everyone.
More with Youmna after the break. Youmna, it was day 71 of the war that you and your family finally made it out of Gaza and safely into Egypt with your whole family. But I know that the trauma of it didn't just end once you safely got across the border. You spoke about this in an interview with the podcast and radio show This American Life. A week after you arrived in Egypt, you were unable to speak.
I wasn't talking, literally. I was not speaking, not even to my mom, not to my dad. I just felt like I can't talk. I have nothing to say. I don't know, the only thing that I felt is like I have this very strong, very big, heavy concrete sheet over my chest that's just blocking everything.
And now you're traveling around the world. I've seen pictures of you on your Instagram. You're spreading the story of what has happened to you and what's happening to Palestinians in Gaza in places as far away as Botswana and South Africa, to Italy and Bosnia. How did you find your voice again? What did it take?
I felt like it was the hardest decision that I took to leave Gaza, especially at that time. I felt like I'm abandoning Gaza. I'm abandoning the people. I still have more to do and to show. And this hasn't stopped, so I can't leave now. But then I got to the point where my dad, he said, "You need to choose between being a parent and a journalist now. And these children now at this time, they need a parent. You have done what you could." And I felt, Malika, that they've reached that stage where, the despair that I used to see in other children's eyes, it was right there in the eyes of my children. And that was the decision. I felt like I'm going to be a parent. I'm going to be a mom now. The moment I came out of Gaza, for such a long time, and I tell you, these 3 months have passed like 3 years on me, if not more. I wasn't able to break down, Malika. I forgot how to cry. The killing of Samir, I didn't cry. And Samir was one of my closest friends.
Al Jazeera cameraman.
Regardless being my colleague, Samir, regardless working in the same office together, Samir was a friend of mine that I loved very much. The first time I cried was when I spoke to Wael.
Wael al-Dahduh.
Yes, I spoke to Wael al-Dahduh and I said, "Wael, Hamza was my younger brother. And he just said, Youmna, Hamza loved you very much. I teared for a little bit and I felt a lot of pain in my heart, but it wasn't coming back enough. But the fact that I went to Egypt and I found my family there and someone to take care of my children that I can depend on, that was like a shock to my emotions, to my body.
Yeah.
And then that's when I started giving in bit by bit, feeling that survival guilt with all that emotional and physical pain. I just felt that I can't get up from the bed anymore. I can't speak. I can't eat. Every single time I closed my eyes, Malika, I saw these images that I can never forget in Gaza. And I still do until now.
Of course. It doesn't just go away.
No, it doesn't.
Youmna, you mentioned our Al Jazeera colleagues, our slain Al Jazeera colleagues, Samer Abu Daqqa and Hamza al-Dahdouh. You all put your lives at risk to tell the story of this war. And of course, to that, I also have to add Ismail al-Ghul and others and others and others. They lost their lives. And you are speaking at journalism panels and to fellow journalists outside of Gaza now who invite you to come and tell your story and share what you've reported on. Has this past year shaken your faith in the industry, though, and in your fellow journalists who are outside of Gaza?
Well, first of all, I go out and I speak because I found that this was the only therapy that I could give myself and offer myself to start curing myself from that survival guilt, that this genocide is still ongoing. It hasn't stopped. The fact that when you read those headlines of other news outlets describing an attack on children in a residential homes, I've never read, for a starter, a headline saying that the children were killed. It's always dead by an attack.
Yeah.
Where in other headlines, in Ukraine, for example, the victims are always killed or injured by the attack. The headline is very precise where you can get all that full information that you need just from reading the headline. But it's not the same when it comes to Gaza. Clear double standards. And for so long, I believed in journalism to be that independent authority to point out the wrongdoing so that these people could be held accountable for what they do. And it really shook my perceptions about journalism. This is not journalism.
Yeah.
And you know, when for so long you have looked out and above to these international journalistic bodies, and then you just realize that it's all a lie, it's all fake. It has nothing to do with the integrity of journalism, with the authenticity of journalism. Nothing at all. And I believe that, no, I'm not going to give up, Malika. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to go out and say that this is not journalism. This is not what journalism means.
Yeah. I am so empowered hearing you say that you're not going to stop and you have a new mission, and that is to show these journalism bodies and institutions what it is they're doing wrong. I want to end, though, Youmna, on another thing that we have in common, aside from being journalists who are a bit disappointed and disgusted in our industry at the moment, and that is being mothers. At least 14,000 children have been killed since the start of the war in Gaza, and so many more are alive but are living it daily. That includes your kids who are still living it in their minds even though they're not physically in Gaza right now. How are they doing now?
I encourage them to cope. They don't like it here. They don't like it anywhere. It's not about the place. It's about that place not being Gaza.
Mm.
You know, I'm trying to convince them that you need to be strong. You need to be okay so that when you go back, we can rebuild. We can rebuild our homes, rebuild our lives, rebuild our futures. They feel disappointed and abandoned by the world.
Yeah.
And they're very strict about boycott. They boycott everything. Like nothing enters our home that is boycotted. And this is, I think, one of the ways in showing or like showing that or dealing with that rage that they have inside.
Yeah.
And they say a very cute thing. They say like, Jusha, for example, she says, I love Pringles, but I'll never eat it because this is children's blood. Because if I eat it, this is the blood of the children of Gaza. And I'm proud of them. I'm proud of their love. And I'm proud of how much they are attached to their land. Despite all the fear they live, despite all the suffering and challenges and everything bad that they have endured, their love for their lands and their love for the return to their lands is greater than all that.
And that's The Take. For more of our coverage from Gaza, Israel, the occupied West Bank, and the region, take a look at our episode playlist right here on YouTube. Then use the comments to tell us what other stories you'd like to see.